ES8 has a few more new features that were introduced in 2017 compared to ES7. In this video, we'll just go over the important ones. So the very first one is string padding. We have new functions that we can add to strings, which is pad start and pad end. Now, to demonstrate this, let's go into the console and let's just do a turtle, and we'll do a pad start of 10. If I do this, I get turtle with 10 spaces in front of it. If I do pad end, I get turtle with 10 spaces after it. And this is useful just for aligning characters of strings if you want specific padding for them. Again, very, very simple, easy to pick up, just another string method that we received. All right, let's go into the second one. The second one that we got is something called trailing commas in functions, parameter lists, and calls. What does that mean? Well, now I can do something like const fun A, B, C, D, and add a comma at the end. And if I do a function, let's just say console.logs A, just a silly, simple function, I can now run this function like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a comma at the end. And this is still valid JavaScript. If I run this, you see that it works. Console log A, which is 1, gets logged. Now, why would this be useful at all? The main reason is when you start getting really, really big parameter lists, you'll see a lot of people doing things similar to this, just to make things a little bit cleaner. And when you start doing this, every time you add a new parameter, it's a lot easier. But also in GitHub, when you make changes, it actually makes the difference, the green and the red differences, a lot cleaner. So it's just syntactic and just make things look a little bit nicer. Again, you normally wouldn't want to do something like this, but maybe when you have long parameter lists like that, the ending comma is now valid and it won't give out an error. All right, let's look at the next one. The next one is we have object.values and object.entries. And these are very, very useful because before these, we had something called object.keys. And object.keys allowed us to do something similar to arrays, but on objects. So, for example, if we had an object that, let's say, we'll have an object, and this object will have username 0 Santa, we have username 1 Rudolph, and we also have username 2 Mr. Grinch. Now, looking at this object, because it's not an array, we can't do the map or filter or reduce, but this is kind of an ugly object. And this illustrates a good point. Sometimes when you're working with servers, you'll get objects that you don't really like or you don't want to work with, but you still want to iterate over them. And before, we could do something like this with object.keys. Let me make a little bit more space over here so we can see. I could do object.keys, and in here we'll throw the object, and now I can use it like an array. It'll go one by one like an array. So it's as if it's an array, but except it has property and values. So let's say we wanted to do a for each loop, and for each key, that is, for each key in the array, so for each username, we also have the index, so that is 0, 1, 2. Let's wrap this in brackets. And now within here, we can say console.log key, and then object key. So now we're grabbing the object with the key username. So if I console.log this, let's copy and paste this, clean this up a bit, and I see that I have username Santa, username 1 Rudolph, username 2 Mr. Grinch. And that's one way for us to iterate or loop through objects. But with object.entries, things become a little bit easier. For example, we can do object, let's make more space. We can do object.values, and the object.values, if I do a for each here, I simply grab the value, and from the value, I can just console.log value. And now I get the value of each object. That is, it loops through Santa, Rudolph, and Mr. Grinch. With the entries, if I do object.entries, well, let's see what happens. Let's clear this. I get an array of username Santa, username 1 Rudolph, and username 2 Mr. Grinch. So this gives you a lot of control. You get both property and value, or key and value, and you can do whatever you want with it and use for each, map, reduce, filter, all those array functions. So let's use a real life scenario here. Let's say we just received this from the backend. The backend just sent us a bunch of users that they had in the database, and we want to generate usernames for them because we don't like the username 0, username 1, username 2. We want a display name that displays the Santa with the ID number, that is 0, for Rudolph will be 1, for Mr. Grinch will be 2. How can we do that using our newfound powers? Well, I can just simply do something with object.entries, and object.entries will have an object that I can map over, and this will give us a value. Again, remember that this will return arrays, and here we just want to return, let's do a value of 1 because we want to grab Santa, Rudolph, and Mr. Grinch, so that is the second item in the array. And then we want to add to that, like a string, value 0, which is the first item. So username 0, username 1, username 2. And here we want to replace, this is just a function that we can use on strings, and we want to replace username with an empty string. So what we're doing here is we're creating a new string with Santa 0 because we don't need the username in here. So now, even though we have an object, we can loop through it like an array, and look at that, we have new usernames, Santa 0, Rudolph 1, and Mr. Grinch 2. How cool is that? So these are really, really useful additions to the language, especially object values and object.entries. You can do a lot with it, but there's one big ES8 feature that has arrived that everybody's excited about, and they're called async await. Now, it's brand new and everybody in the community is really excited about it. However, in order to fully grasp the benefit and understand it, we need an entire video on its own. So, I'll see you on that one. Bye-bye.